Thank you. May I proceed, Judge?
You may.
No, there is not murder without malice. All murders have malice. And we walk through all of those photographs, and you know all the facts of your case, and how can this be anything but malicious? You talk about like there's no violence to this. How is that not violent? He died a violent, long, prolonged death. It's almost better the parent who takes the baby and throws him up against the wall and the baby dies instantly from brain damage. Not Sterling. He just got left in the room. And they want to act like this isn't her fault. She did the drugs. She felt depressed. How can we hold her responsible for this? You know, she'll be responsible for one count, but not for the other. Do you find those excuses acceptable? Do you really find that this is not a malicious act, that committing child endangerment by willfully depriving, by choosing to not feed your baby is anything but malicious? Now let's be clear about a couple other things. You do not have to prove specific intent to kill. There is no specific intent to kill in this case. And I was very clear about this during my closing, that the result, Sterling's death, is not where the intent is. Okay, these are all general intent crimes. There are murders that have specific intent to kill. One of the elements would be the defendant had a specific intent to kill so-and-so. This is not one of those murders. So please do not be confused by those statements. We do not have to prove specific intent to kill. It doesn't matter if she knew or if she wanted a particular end result. What matters is the end result happened because of her choices, because of her actions. The other thing is, malice can be found at any time during this time frame, for any length of time during this time frame. Don't be confused that we have to show malice existed every day, every minute, every hour through this entire time frame of Sterling's life. It can last for a second. It can last for a day. It can last for 2 whole weeks while Sterling's sitting in that room. And let's also be clear that the defendant's mental health only goes towards whether or not she had the general intent to commit the crime, whether or not she committed the acts in a knowing and voluntary manner, and it wasn't an accident. It wasn't by mistake. You know there's no accidents or mistakes in this case. You don't accidentally leave your baby in the room for 2 weeks and not feed them. First-degree murder is reserved for the most horrendous deaths. That's why we're here. How much more horrendous does it get than this? So what do you find reasonable? Just because they've thrown out that she's depressed, she can't have malice, she's sorry it happened, she didn't mean for it to happen, just because that's thrown out there doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change what you know from the evidence. And you have to decide the facts from the evidence. And you try to reconcile any conflicts, and if you can't, then you pick what you find more believable. You have to make a decision. So is it reasonable to believe that she was so severely depressed that she was completely incapable of taking care of her son for at least 10 to 14 days when she was able to feed, bathe, and clothe Nala? Nala should have an exhibit sticker on her head. She should be exhibit number 1. Right? Nala is the reason that you know that this claim of I'm not capable of taking care of Sterling because I'm depressed and because I use drugs is not true. She took care of Nala. Now, they want to say, well, Nala was older. She could climb on her. She could pull on her. She could get her attention. Yeah, a baby screaming is very demanding. That gets your attention. A filthy, stinking room gets your attention. And guess what? She chose to put Sterling out of her presence so she didn't have to pay attention to him. Her choice, her act. She was able to drive to the grocery store. She bought groceries for her family 4 days prior. Is that someone who's just so depressed they can't even function? They don't know what they're doing? She got milk, chocolate milk, pop, chips. She was able to Facebook, Instagram, text. She's posting about fashion and her dog on Facebook while Sterling is dying in the back room. Is that someone who's so depressed that she doesn't know what she's doing? She's able to clean the house. She was able to get rid of the dog. She put Nala in a pretty dress before the police arrived. Did you catch those time frames? There was a length of time when they found Sterling dead before they called the police. Why? They probably had to get the drugs out of the house. They had to get the dog out of the house because they weren't supposed to have him. They put Nala in a nice dress. They wanted to look like a good family, so their story sounded good. Is that someone who's so depressed they didn't know what they did? Is it reasonable to believe that she was so depressed when she's able to normally carry on over a 2-hour interview after finding Sterling? Remember that. Dr. Demick told you that. That interview, listen to it again if you want. We have a clean computer. You can take it back to the jury room. You can listen to it again if you need to. But that interview and how she acted and how she spoke is one of the best indicators of who she was and what her mental state was at the time. And when you listen to that interview, you hear a lot of interesting things that clearly show she was aware of what she was doing. She provided her phone number. She provided her life history, where she grew up, who her family was. She provided detail upon detail of her child care. Now, if you remember during that interview, you may not have picked it up at the time, but if you listen to it again, you will find that she constantly talked about Nala. I mean, you could see the preference she had for Nala in that interview alone. Because every time she was asked something about Sterling, she'd started to describe Sterling's birth. But then she spent a page and a half of that transcript talking about Nala's birth and was excited about it, and she loved Nala. Remember she said Nala's such a smart little girl, she could write a book. She's Daddy's little girl. She could give every detail of what happened prior to Sterling being found, down to the times of when she got up, of when Zach got home, and they had grilled cheese. If someone has such an awful mental condition that they don't even know that they're not feeding their child, could they have this type of interview? And that's just common sense. Is it reasonable to believe that she was so severely depressed that she was able to be dishonest with people? I want you to think about this very closely. They want you to believe that when she told their doctor and our doctor about her depression issues and how she was feeling during that time and the types of things that she was experiencing, they want you to believe all of that. Okay? And their own doctor said, we had to take what she said as true to make the diagnosis. Okay, but here's what you know from the evidence. She was dishonest with Tina Shatter. She's one of the first responders at that house, and she's already telling a story to cover up what she did, to protect herself. But she told Tina she fed him 9:30 the night before. You know that's not true. She was dishonest with Reed Caleb. She told him that she gave Sterling regular feedings, 4-ounce bottles. No problems at all with him. He died of SIDS. You know that's not true. She was dishonest. She was protecting herself. She was dishonest with Agent Calloway, trying to deflect anything that had to do with improper care. When Agent Turbot pulled up at the library in Osage just a few days later, she tried to drive away from him. Right? She had the wherewithal to think about that, to protect herself, but they want you to believe she didn't have the wherewithal to take care of Sterling. She told Zach, see, I told you we should have taken Nala and Leo and run. She knew that she should have gotten out of town because she knew what she did. She knew she was responsible for it, and she didn't want to accept the consequences for her actions. She was dishonest with Sheila Schrader. She told her she paid Sterling every 3 days, and that the last days of his life were normal. Dishonest. Is it reasonable to believe that she had no idea that Sterling was cared for? That she was in such a mental state, such a depression, such a drug use? That she didn't have the basic knowledge of what was going on in her home? Is it reasonable to believe that any excuse she has provided to you can justify what happened to Sterling? Is it reasonable to believe that she has no responsibility for the health and safety of her child? Or is it more reasonable to believe that she really was just tired of changing diapers? Is it more reasonable to believe that she really was just tired of hearing him cry? Is it more reasonable to believe that she didn't want anything to do with Sterling, that she blamed Sterling because he was the reason her family was messed up? Now, obviously, this is not logical thinking, but that doesn't mean that it's thinking that changes that she knew what she was doing at the time. Okay? It's not okay, it's not right. But if that's how she felt, and you know that's how she felt, because she acted on those feelings. Is it more reasonable to believe that Zach wanted nothing to do with Sterling, and she just wanted to please Zach? She wanted Zach to come home from work and not see Sterling. She wanted him to be able to play with Nala and to see her and to pretend that they didn't have that baby boy that he didn't think was his, that he didn't want. She knew what she did. She knew what was wrong. She covered up her actions, and she attempted to deceive others to protect herself. She clearly had the mental functioning to know exactly what she was doing. She just didn't want to accept the consequences for her actions. Is it reasonable for her to not be held responsible for her actions merely because she now claims that looking back, she knows she shouldn't have felt that way about Sterling? Right? How many of us have felt that way? I mean, use your life experience and your common sense. And whether it be something that you did as a parent with your child, or maybe it was a relationship that you were in and that you stayed in too long or shouldn't have gotten in the first place. How many times in people's lives do you look back at something and say, wow, I can't believe I thought that way at the time. Why did I continue to do that? I wouldn't do that now. I wish I had that. It doesn't excuse what you did at the time. You're still responsible for what you did. You still chose that person to be with in that relationship, and you chose to stay in that relationship. And it's very easy to say a year down the road that you should have got out a lot sooner. But it doesn't make you less responsible for it. This is not some split-second decision, or a mistake, or an accident. This wasn't, I put my baby in the bathtub and I was so tired and I'd been so depressed and I walked out of the room and I forgot she was in there and she drowned. Okay, this wasn't, I had my kids in the car and my infant child was sleeping and my other two kids were screaming and we went to the grocery store and I forgot my baby in the car. And I've been depressed and I haven't been thinking right and I haven't been sleeping and it was an accident. That is not what we're talking about. This is, I put my baby in the back room. And for 2 weeks I chose not to change him, feed him, hydrate him, love him, nothing. Knowing all the while that he's there. There's no mistake or accident here. That's the only thing that her mental health goes to. Was this a mistake or an accident? Did she generally not know what was going on? Her actions were continuous and consistent over a long period of time. So when you're looking at what's reasonable, you have to look at what's credible. Who do you find credible in this case? Now there's no dispute to Sterling's death. Okay, the crime scene testimony is unrefuted. Dr. Klein's testimony is unrefuted. Dr. Huntington's testimony is unrefuted. The only dispute is whether the defendant is responsible. Do you find her responsible for what happened to Sterling? She claims she's not, and she's provided you with reasons why. So do you find her credible? What you find reasonable is directly linked to who you find credible. The truth never changes. Her story's still. All right, she told Agent Calloway that she tried meth, but she was dishonest about that. Because you know that she used meth a lot, all the time. She told Agent Calloway, never had meth in the house, not around the kids. And you know, that's not true either, because Jordan Clark testified about going over there on at least 2 occasions and doing meth with the kids in the house. She told Agent Calloway the dog was at a friend's house. The dog didn't stay there. Her baby just died. She is being interviewed by a DCI agent. And she is more concerned about covering up her dog and her meth use than actually finding out what's wrong with her baby. And what does that tell you? She knew what was wrong with her baby. She knew that she was responsible. She told Agent Calloway she fed Sterling 3 to 4 times a day, every day. Not true. She took Sterling out of the swing the night before and changed his diaper. Not true. She gave him a bottle the night before. Not true. She told Reed Palo he was crying the morning of the 30th. Absolutely not true. You know that from the evidence. She told Sheila Schrader she bathed Sterling every 3 days. Not true. Told Tina Shattuck he was fine when she fed him the night before at 9:30. Not true. She was not honest with any of those people. People who were there to help her find out what happened to her baby. Well, she didn't need that help because she knew what happened to her baby. And the only thing that she did was be dishonest with them so she could protect herself and cover up what she did. So why would you believe that she's being honest about her mental health with the doctors over a year and a half while she's facing criminal charges? Okay, Dr. O'Hara's opinion is largely based on the assumption that what defendant told him was true. She had everything to gain by what she said to him and nothing to lose. Do you find her credible? And do you find her statements to him so credible that it excuses this? That what happened to him is not malicious? That she didn't know what she was doing, which in turn made Sterling end up like this? Do you find that credible? And what about the mental health? The diagnoses do not matter. Now, it was said in the defense's closing that basically the doctors agreed. Well, the doctors didn't agree so much. Dr. Denner was pretty clear that if she had this global, systematic, severe depression, it would have looked different. But what Dr. Denner said, even if she had those things, she had depression, PTSD, addiction, there's nothing in the facts of this case that show that it affected her ability to care for a child, or that made her incapable of caring for her child. You have to look at the facts of the case. The diagnoses would have shown this global and persistent behavior that would have affected all aspects of her life, not just Sterling. That's why Nall is so important. There's a happy, healthy baby girl in that house, while her baby boy lay rotting in the back room. Depression doesn't work that way. You don't pick and choose like that. Dr. Denner said she was not so severely impaired that she could, without not knowing, allow her infant son to starve to death without being aware of it. Okay, so who do you find more credible? And more importantly, you didn't need a doctor to tell you that. That's just common sense. You saw it from the evidence. The state does not have to prove to you why she did this. We absolutely do not have to prove to you why. Did she commit a particular action? Did she know she was doing that? It wasn't a mistake or an accident? Was it malicious? Did Sterling end up dead? That's what we have to prove to you. We don't have to prove why. Right? Could it be because she didn't want him in the first place? Could be. Could it be her only care was pleasing Zach? Could be. Could it be that she wanted out of that apartment, she wanted back on the road with Zach and Nala, and Sterling was getting in the way of that? Could be. But the point is, it doesn't matter. All of those would be reasonable inferences, but the why doesn't matter. And does it change anything? You know, we have a lot of tragic things happen in our society. You hear about people walking into elementaries and shooting children in movie theaters and killing people and all of that. But does it really matter when that person walked in there and did what they did and opened fire on young children? Do you really care why? It's interesting. We like to know it, but it doesn't change what happened. And it doesn't change what it did. And in this case, the why doesn't change what she did. It doesn't matter. The other thing is, this didn't just happen out of the blue. It's not like there was some instantaneous break with reality in the month of August. You saw this early on. Remember some of the evidence you heard about. Her disinterest, her dislike, her distaste of Sterling was earlier in the evidence, since June. Jennifer Schriever said she never saw her outside with the baby. Remember she talked about the first time she met the defendant was at the gas station. Now, she introduced herself to the defendant because she had saw her at the apartment complex. And the only time she had saw her at the complex was when she was outside with a little girl. Never with a baby. All right, so even at that time, she wasn't spending a lot of time with Sterling. Since June, everyone who saw Sterling said he was thin. All right, he wasn't being completely deprived, but he wasn't fattening up like any baby should. He probably wasn't being fed the amounts that he should. During Clark, he was in their apartment at least 2 times, doing meth with the defendant, while Sterling was in the back room, and he had no idea they had a baby. They had Nala. He watched the defendant play with Nala. He said that she seemed so happy with Nala. Didn't even know there was a baby there. Told Calloway that they were trying to get Nala potty trained, so she and Nala could go back on the road with Zach. Right? She said that during the interview, that they've been working on that, getting Nala potty trained so they could go back on the road. No mention of Sterling. Remember how she spoke with Sterling during the interview? Compare that how she spoke about Nala. We talked about that earlier, and she had clearly disconnected herself from Sterling. Do you remember during the interview when she talked about her childbirth of Sterling at home, at a friend's house in the bathtub? All right, this is supposed to be one of the most beautiful, wonderful things that a woman can go through. It's having her baby. Painful? Yes. Discomfort? Of course. But think about that experience of having your own child. And also keep in mind that when she's talking about this experience, she just found her child dead in her house. But how does she describe having Sterling? She says, I go to stand up and there's an effing bulge, and I'm like, oh my God, there's an effing head. That's how she talks about Sterling. Just a few hours after he's found dead. Do you think there's a disconnect there? That she had shut the door a long time ago and she was done with him? These are not the words or demeanor of a grieving mother who just lost her only son. Okay, it happened, the why doesn't matter, and none of you will ever know exactly why this happened. You could stay up for nights, for weeks, for months, trying to figure out how another human being can do this to a child. but you're never going to find yourself a good answer. And the only thing you're going to do is lose sleep. Okay? The why doesn't matter. Ladies and gentlemen, it is your duty as jurors in this case to seek the truth and to do justice. It says that in your jury instructions. It is your duty to do that. And you know what the truth tells you in this case? The truth tells you that that woman let her baby rot in that back room. That she chose to do that. That she was fully capable of preventing his death. Fully capable of feeding him, changing him. She could have picked him up and dropped him off at the fire station steps in Alta Vista. She could have dropped him off at the hospital, let somebody else take care of Sterling, but she didn't. She left him there to rot. There are no words that can be said to adequately describe what happened to Sterling. There are no words that can do any justice to the pain and the suffering that he went through. I can't give you the words to make any of this better. I don't have any of the words to make this right. There is nothing that any of us can do to bring Sterling back. But you do have the words to do justice in this case. And your words are simple, and they're easy. And they are clearly meant for this case, for both counts. Your words can tell the defendant in this case that she failed miserably as a mother and as a human being. Your words cannot bring Sterling back, but your words can do justice. And your words can tell this defendant that she is responsible and that there are consequences to what she did. And your words, ladies and gentlemen, are guilty. Guilty of murder in the first degree, guilty of child endangerment causing death. It's that simple. Use your words. Thank you.